Hello.
Welcome back to the Space Gulag. Today we're going to find out what would have happened had Obi-Wan saved Darth Vader. Before we begin this video, special thanks to our patrons, voice actors, and everyone else part of our Pente Patrol team. Want a chance to win a free lightsaber in our giveaway? Watch the end of the video. I'll tell you exactly how you can win. Our story begins in the shrouded of darkness on the moon, in the Outer Rim. Vader tracked Obi-Wan down to this planet after he went to Jabim. The two had been dueling here for several minutes. Obi-Wan at the moment was buried under thousands of pounds worth of rocks and boulders. Vader piled them on top of him for the sole purpose of burying him alive. Vader left. He didn't have time to wait Obi-Wan out, as he turned away. Obi-Wan, on the other hand, was running through memories. He was thinking about the two children he was protecting, Luke and Leia, the children of Anakin Skywalker. They were what brought Obi-Wan back to this level. It was a tantalizing experience for Kenobi. He spent 9 years in the desert forgetting about the life of a Jedi, and yet, when he was called to come back, he felt more like a Jedi than ever before. When he saved Leia, he realized what he had to do from here on out. Obi-Wan looked up, above him, as he kept his hand above his head. He pushed up with his hand and the boulders cleared the way, as Obi-Wan used the Force to propel himself up the side of the hole that he was currently in. He grabbed his lightsaber and sensed for Vader. He was nearby. Kenobi ran between the rocks and leapt over mounds as he got closer and closer to the sounds of heavy breathing. Kenobi picked up speed as Vader stopped in his tracks to ignite his lightsaber, in time to stop Obi-Wan's blade from killing him. Obi-Wan and Vader tossed and turned as their blades collided again and again. Obi-Wan switched from his mastered form into the more aggressive Form 4. Vader was pushed into a retreat as he stumbled backwards. Holding as much ground as he could, defending himself from Obi-Wan's assault was more difficult than he'd ever expect. Kenobi swung with his blade upwards, pushing Vader off balance, and then he swung his hand around with precision as he launched Vader from his feet, throwing him into the side of a mountain nearby. Obi-Wan stepped forward and closed his eyes as he allowed the Force to rise next to him. As he did, several rocks and boulders lifted up from behind him as he used the Force to propel the little pieces of hardened sand at Vader. Obi-Wan knew Skywalker all too well. Sand was absolutely his weakness. Obi-Wan stepped forward as the sheer magnitude of rocks and boulders and everything between were hurled at Vader as he groaned in pain. When Obi-Wan stopped, he ripped his blade out and around and collided with Vader's. For Vader, he couldn't believe it. He'd spent every waking moment of the last 9 years since Mustafar thinking about beating Obi-Wan. He'd been training for this moment, ready to kill Kenobi, and yet here he was, on the backpedal against the Master of Defense. Obi-Wan and Vader then united as brothers again on the battlefield, as their hands grabbed a hold of each other's. They held hands while they swung at each other. Their bond as former master and apprentice showed in this moment. And then, Obi-Wan shoved away from his grip, and he turned his lightsaber around and began to shove back into the hilt of Vader's chest piece. Harder and harder with each swing, Vader began to tumble backwards, and as he did, his mask fogged up, and his breathing got tense. Vader's patience began to shorten, as he took a violent swing at Kenobi. Obi-Wan at this point was going by muscle memory. So many times did Anakin make the same mistake, just for Vader to be the full imagery of a failure of a student. Obi-Wan sidestepped quickly and dragged his blade up Vader's back as he tumbled to the ground. Kenobi looked around at his fallen apprentice, as he waited for Vader to stand up again. Obi-Wan was fully in his element, swinging his blade around, as a master of his craft. He looked at Vader and watched him slowly grow to his feet as Obi-Wan leaned into the Force and threw Vader from his feet, tumbling into the other side of a rock. Kenobi was ready. He twirled his lightsaber once more as he ran towards Vader, leaping into the air and slashing down, colliding his blade with Vader's mask, revealing a piece of the man who used to be Anakin Skywalker on the inside. As Obi-Wan steadied himself back, he looked down. There was a very human-like groaning from the smoke that fled Vader's mask. Kenobi looked, and as his confidence soared, his heart shattered. He looked down at Vader and saw a single eye from Anakin Skywalker looking back. Obi-Wan's heart broke into a million pieces because this wasn't Vader. Obi-Wan beat Vader on Mustafar. This was Anakin Skywalker, the same man that Obi-Wan said goodbye to on Coruscant before the Purge, before the Battle of Grievous, before the end of the war. This was his best friend looking at him. Vader stumbled to his feet as he looked at Obi-Wan. Kenobi let out a weak breath as he said Anakin's name. The man behind the mask said in agony, sadness, and terror that Anakin was gone. He was all that remained. Obi-Wan saw it. Anakin Skywalker wasn't dead. He was in there somewhere. He was still a part of the suit. He hadn't fully given up yet. Obi-Wan's mouth trembled as he apologized to Anakin for everything. The real Anakin Skywalker didn't blame Obi-Wan because it wasn't Obi-Wan's fault for his descent into darkness. Could he have been better? For sure. But Anakin didn't want Obi-Wan to live with a life full of guilt for his only apprentice being a failure. Anakin told Kenobi that it was not Obi-Wan's failure. Obi-Wan did not kill Anakin Skywalker. Obi-Wan looked as Anakin's eyes lost their purity. The tears on the side of his cheekbones dried, and the red lining filled out the outer layer of his eyes, and yellow filled the middle, as he told Obi-Wan that he killed Anakin Skywalker. Obi-Wan's tears sat in his eyes as he looked at Vader. Darth Vader returned. Obi-Wan held back his breath as Vader continued saying that it was the same way that he would destroy Obi-Wan. Kenobi couldn't live with abandoning Anakin here. He looked at Vader and demanded to know how this could happen. Vader stepped forward angrily, raising his lightsaber, ready to kill. Obi-Wan then again asked Anakin what Palpatine told him. Vader stopped. He looked at Obi-Wan with shock in his eyes. He'd spent years repressing his fall from grace. He spent every waking moment telling himself that he wasn't deserving of a life of happiness. Vader's anger grew, but the Anakin inside cried. Obi-Wan asked if Palpatine told him about Padme. Vader's stare could destroy a star system as he glared at Obi-Wan. Vader almost asked why Obi-Wan said that name. Why did Obi-Wan say her name? Obi-Wan could tell based on Anakin's reaction that there was something left of Anakin. Obi-Wan came to a hunch though. He knew that the quickest way to Anakin was Padme, but he was curious what he knew. Obi-Wan knew about the funeral and how it was a setup for Padme. It was said that she died before giving birth, but only Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Bail knew the whole truth. Vader tried to sound tough as he asked Obi-Wan what he meant. Obi-Wan steadied back. Vader was a bit too close for comfort, as he told Vader that Padme survived Mustafar, and even more than that, Obi-Wan paused. If he told Anakin about the children, he could either sway Vader, or he would have to kill him. Vader demanded to know what happened. His impatience soared as his eyes of Anakin came through again. Obi-Wan told Vader that his children were born. They were alive. Vader's eyes lost their tint as he stumbled back. His disbelief couldn't be matched. He had no clue how to understand or even conceptualize what Obi-Wan had just said to him. Anakin came through again, as he asked Obi-Wan to repeat it. Obi-Wan didn't lower his guard, but he continued, and told him that Padme survived and then gave birth to Anakin's children. Anakin was shocked at the notion of a survival that his master lied about. Even more than that was the birth of not just one, but multiple children. Though part of Anakin didn't want to believe this. It was too good to be true. It was a setup, or something that Obi-Wan was trying to do so they could kill him. Anakin demanded their names. Obi-Wan didn't stutter as he said the names Luke and Leia. Vader's lightsaber fell to the ground, and then slowly, after the metallic husk of Vader tumbled to the ground, his knees planted into the dust, clearing a path around the ground that he fell on. Vader's hands fell before his face, and then he let out a terrible howl of pain, mixed with the vocalizer of his mask and Anakin's actual voice. Obi-Wan sheathed his blade as a tear fell down his face. All the memories of the children came back, and the death of Padme sat forefront in the front of his mind. Obi-Wan, still skeptical on Vader, didn't step forward though. On the other side, Vader's eyes filled with tears as he thought back on his fondest memories of he and his wife before her death. It was one of the few pieces of Anakin Skywalker that never died. He couldn't let go of this memory, it was too pure. Padme and Anakin were talking. It was after the Battle of Coruscant. It was one day before Order 66 and the death of everything Anakin knew. Padme and Anakin were talking on her high-rise luxury apartment. The sun was setting and the breeze was perfect to the touch. Padme was elegant with her flowing hair and her glimmering smile. Her eyes lit like the stars and her voice as soft as an angel's. Anakin and her stood in the balcony, with each other, their hands interlocked as they stood in silence, just admiring the perfect view of one another. Anakin's stresses were gone. He wasn't thinking about Palpatine, the Clone Wars, the Jedi, or anything. He was living in this moment with his wife. A song was played and the two of them shared a close, slow dance with each other, just with their arms around each other as they embraced each other. Padme's head was perfectly aligned with Anakin's chest, and his head nestled gently on her head. She poised the question to him. What should they name their child? While the technology was up to the standards, and they could know what their child would be, or the fact that there'd be two of them, they didn't want to know. So Anakin asked what she thought of names. Padme smiled. She had come to the names of mind, but she wanted to hear what Anakin's thoughts were. Anakin snickered as he told her that he hadn't much time to think on it. The two of them continued their slow dance with a little giggle. Padme then told Anakin that if their child were to be a girl, then they should name her Leia. It was such a beautiful name. Anakin could remember the chill that fell down his spine when Padme said the name Leia. It was a perfect name for a little girl, and Anakin told Padme that it was. Padme was enthralled to hear that Anakin liked the name that Padme came up with, and so she then asked, "What about for a boy?" Anakin made some joking names, more exotic names for Rhodians or Twi'leks, all getting little giggles from the two of them. Anakin then suggested that they stay with something similar. Not too close, but something kind of close to Leia. Of course, the idea that twins would be involved wasn't really a concept in their minds, so Lando was the first name that Anakin said. Padme gave a questionable as Anakin adjusted the name for a boy to Luke. Padme's arms tightened around Anakin's back as she told him that it was the perfect name for a boy. Anakin looked down, and then he was taken away from this beautiful memory. The breeze disappeared and his breathing stiffened. He was back in the suit. It was just a memory of a life that he couldn't live. Anakin spoke out from under the suit as he told Obi-Wan that it was true then. Obi-Wan got closer. He could feel Anakin's broken heart as Anakin said that it was the names that they came up with before everything happened. Obi-Wan bit his lip as he looked at Anakin, still covered in the suit of the Dark Lord. Obi-Wan told him that they could still make things right. There was a chance for change, and that chance for change could make everything right. Anakin under his breath said that things would never be made right. Obi-Wan stopped walking towards Anakin. The suit began to rise as Anakin told Obi-Wan, as he looked through the hole in his mask, that Padme would never come back from the dead. His children would never look at him the same way they would as if he was Anakin Skywalker. Obi-Wan looked into Anakin's eyes, imploring with Anakin to join him, to come back to the light, because together they could take on the Emperor. They could make things right in the galaxy. Anakin's metallic suit creaked and croaked as he stood to his feet. He looked down at Obi-Wan from across the way. Anakin's eyes still had tears in them. Vader stepped forward as he told Obi-Wan that there was no we anymore. Obi-Wan prepared for the fight to commence. As Anakin stopped, he told Obi-Wan that he would make the right of his own wrongings. That instead of being Vader, he would free himself and die as Anakin Skywalker, because no pain was worse than having to be away from his wife. Vader stepped forward and held out his hand towards Obi-Wan, who was still hesitant. Obi-Wan placed his hand on Vader's glove as he monitored the motion of the lightsabers on his hilt and on the ground. Anakin looked into the eyes of Obi-Wan and asked one thing. He asked that Obi-Wan promise to raise his children and tell them of who their father and mother were. Obi-Wan's eyes melted with tears as he looked at Anakin. From under the mask, it was the same confident smile that Anakin Skywalker used to wear, the Jedi one. Obi-Wan's student, his best friend. Anakin looked at Obi-Wan and told him that this was a path doing what needed to be done, because it was his actions that caused all of this to happen. Anakin would hold himself responsible, and then from there, all the wrongs could be made right. Obi-Wan smiled at Anakin. It was like after 9 years of silence, 9 years of assuming he was dead, and thinking the same of the Anakin that ravaged the entire Jedi Order to the ground. It was like not a moment had passed since the last time Anakin and Obi-Wan said goodbye. And so with that, just as their last time, Master and Apprentice parted ways. Anakin placed his hand on top of Obi-Wan's, and said to him, "Goodbye, old friend. May the Force be with you." Obi-Wan looked at Anakin as he pulled his lightsaber to his side and stumbled away. Kenobi watched as the breathing was no longer audible and the stumbling across the pebbles and rocks was no longer visible. The sound of the Imperial shuttle taking off could be heard as Obi-Wan looked over and watched it fly away. Kenobi had to get back to Tatooine to make sure Luke was okay. He had a feeling within the Force that Reva had found the communication device left on Jabim. Luckily for Obi-Wan, when he returned, he was able to find that Luke was safe and Reva had a change of heart. She made a change that saved the life of Luke. Reva was very distraught, and so Obi-Wan, even after the distressing evening he had, came down to her side and helped her. Obi-Wan was inspired though. Whether Anakin succeeded or not, Obi-Wan changed him. Obi-Wan gave the most evil man in the world and the galaxy the hope to become something more. And while he could not have Anakin back himself, Anakin could have himself back before he drifted away into the cosmos of the Force. Within the coming days, Beru and Owen would break out into a massive argument, and Beru would decide that Obi-Wan should be responsible for Luke, because it was evident that the two of them were not capable of taking care of Luke. Reva almost killed both of them, and then almost killed Luke in the process. It wasn't worth the pain of trying to fight off another Inquisitor. Obi-Wan was now left with Luke, and so he decided that he should go to Alderaan to see if he could have a talk with Bail Organa. On the moon of Nur, inside of the Fortress Inquisitorius, Lord Vader waited silently inside of his suit. The entire Inquisitorius was being brought down to the meeting room. The Grand Inquisitor was assuming that it was over the third sister, but when Vader walked into the room and the doors closed, he knew it was over. Vader didn't hesitate. He reached out and ripped the fifth brother off of the floor and ignited his own lightsaber into his body. Vader didn't stop there. The Inquisitors tried to fight it off, but the Grand Inquisitor knew that it was not a fight that they could win. He got down on his knees and placed his lightsaber before him. Vader slashed and cut through the Inquisitorius as they fought for their lives. Vader snapped necks and backs with his bare hands and carried on as if he hadn't. Vader carried on as he looked down at the Grand Inquisitor after killing off the entire Inquisitorius.
Hello.
Vader in a way respected this. He knew it wasn't worth the pain of fighting, and instead, he opted for the painless death. Vader lifted his blade and slashed down, crushing the body of the Inquisitor under his lightsaber. Vader turned and continued out of the building. With the Inquisitors dead, the last threat to Vader was Sidious, and now he was going to Coruscant. On Alderaan, Obi-Wan had the joy of running into Leia again. She was so excited to see Lola, and then she was happy to see Obi-Wan after that. Kenobi had a conversation with Bail about what happened, and Bail suggested that Luke and Leia be raised together. Obi-Wan had permission to stay on Alderaan with them, but they would put him up in a separate apartment inside the city, and he could carry on living his life that way, and from time to time he'd be able to work with Luke and Leia on the Force. But for a short while it would just be uncle-like interactions, and then they would begin their training eventually. Obi-Wan agreed to these terms because they weren't really hard terms to come to terms with, because he now got to spend time with both Luke and Leia. They wouldn't be in any danger, and he would have to be what it would have been for him had Anakin been their father, an uncle. Bail was really perfectly fine with having Luke. While originally he and his wife only wanted a daughter, they didn't mind the addition of Luke. They could pamper another child and it would be fine. Plus it would make it easier to explain to Leia and Luke that they were siblings. On Coruscant, Vader walked into the office of his master. Sidious was surprised. He was in the middle of a meeting with the highest military members of the Imperial military. Thrawn, Tarkin, Krennic, Yularen, just to name a few of the high-ranking officers on deck. It was an entire Imperial military structure in front of him. Vader didn't really care for the pleasantries, and so he ripped them apart before Sidious could react in any way. Thrawn's head was thrown from his body, some necks were snaps, some inaudible screams, and some more lightsaber slashes over here. Palpatine rose from his desk, demanding to know what had gotten into Vader. But then Vader slashed through Palpatine's desk and walked forward. The royal guard in the room panicked, but before they could go anywhere or do anything, Vader snapped their spines, leaving them paralyzed, alive enough to wallow in their deaths for serving the most evil man in the galaxy. Sidious shot forward with lightning as it crashed into Vader's suit. The Dark Lord threw as much lightning as he could, and Vader's lightsaber flipped out of his hand as he cried out in agony. Sidious was furious as he let all of his anger pile into this lightning. Vader fell to his knees as he groaned in pain. His suit began to shut down in different locations. Sidious laughed, and then Vader rose. Sidious' expression was priceless to Anakin, as his breathing stuttered and his suit began to die on him. Anakin was functioning through his usage of the Force. The machine was no longer operable. Anakin stepped forward, defying the odds as he reached out his hands and wrapped them around Sidious' throat. The Dark Lord's eyes shot red as Anakin clenched his metallic grip, crushing Sidious' windpipe in the process. The lightning stopped and then silence filled the room, as Anakin removed his helmet and fell to his knees, next to his dead master. Anakin's eyes looked out across the city. It is the same time of day as it was during his memory of Padme, the same one where they decided on the names of their children. Anakin put his hand up to the glass and shattered it, so that the thin Coruscant breeze could touch his face one last time. As the glass shattered, Anakin fell over and found himself on the ground, looking at the lights of the skyline. He took off his helmet one last time, as a smile rang across his face. He brought balance to the Force, and he hopefully gave his children a better future by ensuring their galaxy was ridden of the Sith. Anakin closed his eyes, and instead of dying, Qui-Gon took him into the Force, releasing his body from being stuck to a human form inside the suit. Within hours, the ISB would launch a full investigation to the depths of the entire military structure, the Emperor and Vader, along with the deaths of the Inquisitorius. The Empire would have to find a way to resolve this issue, and it would cause a lot of tension within the Imperial Senate. The Empire wouldn't necessarily return to the ways of the Republic, but without Palpatine, the slow crushing of freedom and rights would come to an end. The Empire was slowly draining people and taking away their rights, and that would all come to an end with the death of Palpatine. On Alderaan, Bail would continue to be a voice for the Empire, but Obi-Wan would continue to be the adventure-filled uncle for Luke and Leia. Once Luke got acclimated to his new lifestyle, he, Leia, and Obi-Wan would go into the forest on great adventures, hikes, camping trips, anything under the sun was possible on these trips. Obi-Wan would tell them all about everything. They would hear stories about Anakin and Padme, Ahsoka, and the Clone Wars. It was all up in the air. The children would never know about what Vader did, but they would know that their father brought balance to the Force, and while he couldn't be around for their youth, he would always be around. Because of Qui-Gon Jinn, Anakin would be able to come and visit his children and his former master in the form of a Force ghost. The children of Skywalker would have the same opportunity to learn from the Force, and they would. With the Empire losing militaristic support and the Death Star never being constructed, Peace would find its way to the people of the Empire, while happiness would fill the hearts of the Skywalker children and that of Obi-Wan Kenobi, too. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our story. Again, special thanks to Benjamin Wells, Icy Raptor, Apollo, Mad Mana Studios, Anakin003, and Gore for supporting the channel. Let's see the likes on this video. I got some videos coming out this week that I think you guys are going to like. If you want to see what else, let me know below. Comment, do crossovers. Check out the community Discord, the Twitch, and the Patreon if you want to support me in other ways. If you want to learn how to win a free lightsaber, go down below. There's a doc. You click on the doc, you write your name on the doc, and don't pay attention to the comment section. I know how to spell words, and I don't give away things on Telegram or my phone number. That's not me. It's a scam artist. Tell them to fuck off. That's not me. I give away all my my gifts or my giveaways during videos. So next one will be at 50,000 subscribers. Hit that subscribe button if you want to win a free lightsaber. Let's talk about our story. This one was emotional. I'm not gonna lie, I almost cried while writing it. This was really emotional, right? Now, there's a lot of things that we can talk about here, and it's the relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan. It's the relationship for Anakin's children, but I want to do something unique here. What I think you would expect me to do is have Anakin and Obi-Wan team up and and they get to go and do Jedi things, and Anakin just wouldn't do that. He just wouldn't. I think Anakin at this point knew his life was over, and I think he would have taken the hero's exit. I think he would have taken the epic sacrifices of a true hero. I think he would have gone out like a badass. There's not a doubt in my mind that Anakin himself would not want to go out like a badass. Like, he would want to go out like a badass, right? He doesn't have any life. His wife is gone. Yeah, he has his children. Yeah, he has his children, but he's in a mask. He is Darth Vader. He is the scariest person in the galaxy. Children are not going to want to see that, and I think he would know that. I think Vader would know that, and yeah, subconsciously, yeah, he could probably get a better suit, but Vader is scary. Like, he's a scary dude. Like, I know we watched the movies and we've been around with Vader for 40 years, but like, imagine like walking into a hallway and seeing that dude just looking at you. Like, you are going to go from 0 to 100, I want to quit this job as fast as you can. He just has that effect on people, okay? He's like 6'5". He's bulkier than a mountain, and he moves at the speed of a starship when he walks with poise. So he's scary, and children aren't going to see that as, oh my god, that's my cool dad. No, they're going to see that as, that's the devil. So I think the children of Skywalker were better off because of this, and I think it worked out perfectly because Qui-Gon brought Anakin to the Force. Now, I didn't have that intended. That was something I just happened to write in because of the way that Anakin died. I knew that Anakin would die in a self-sacrifice. I knew that was the direction I wanted to go, but Qui-Gon saving him, I did not have in the original script. It was just Anakin dies while having a nice little pretty sunset that reminds him of Padme, and he dies kind of happily, and that's the end of that. But then I was like, well, Qui-Gon's around. You know, Obi-Wan brought Anakin back into the Force, so why can't Qui-Gon do that? So I think Qui-Gon would do that, and it's kind of the same effect that, you know, and same effect that happened to Anakin in the original trilogy. So kind of a callback to that. The most emotional part for me, almost while I was reading this especially, was the goodbye old friend and may the Force be with you. That just hit home. I mean, as George would say, it's like poetry, it just rhymes, and it just rhymed like poetry because it rhymes like poetry. No, honestly, I mean, I like this story. I'm pretty fond of it. It's a very emotionally pulling story, and you guys know how much I like emotional pulling stories. And the last two videos have been rather political, so I figured I might hit you in the throat with a nice soccer punch to the throat on a Sunday afternoon where you're having a great day and you come on and you're like, oh my gosh, I want to cry now. So I hope you all enjoyed. I love you all. Spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.